In 1993, unusual things started to happen around a block of flats on Danneung Road in Frankston. Reports of a peeping Tom and break-ins had left Donna Vanes worried for her safety. Her unit on Claude Street was not far away. She knew all about the goings-on as her sister Tricia lived in those particular flats, and when she received an anonymous threatening call, Vanes was fearful of being alone. She had recently had a newborn baby, and to make ends meet, her boyfriend was a pizza delivery driver. Donna asked her boyfriend Les to take her and their newborn baby out while he delivered pizzas. A small decision, but ultimately a sensible decision that would without doubt save her life. Les and Donna arrived home at about 11 p.m. that night to be confronted with the most horrific scene. On the lounge room wall next to the television set and written in blood were the words, "Donna, you're dead." Lying on the floor in the middle of the kitchen was the remains of Donna's cat Buffy, slaughtered with its intestines strewn across the floor and its eyes removed, and with a picture of a bikini-clad woman strewn over its disemboweled body. Police officers were immediately called. The scene upstairs was just as gruesome. In the bathroom, police found Vane's 2 kittens, also slaughtered with their throats cut, floating in the bath. In the laundry room there was blood everywhere, sprayed all up the walls and all over a plastic laundry basket full of baby's clothes. In the main bedroom the intruder had ransacked every drawer and clothes were ripped and strewn everywhere. More pornographic images had been posted over a wardrobe. These images had been slashed, as had other furniture. The intruder had placed a pornographic image, which had also been slashed, inside the crib of Vane's baby. The words Donna and Robin had been sprayed in white shaving foam on the dressing table mirror. Donna didn't know anyone called Robin. Unwilling to stay at the unit, she moved in with her sister. Little did she know she wasn't escaping the man terrorising her, but she was now moving next door to him. For the residents of Frankston, this was just the start of the nightmare, as the man living next door to Donna and Tricia many years ago as a young child cut the throats of his sister's teddy bears, before moving on to torture cats and kittens. Now he was ready to act out his hatred and fantasy on people. On Saturday, June the 12th, 1993, the partially closed body of 18-year-old student Elizabeth Stevens was found in Lloyd Park, on the Cranbourne Road, Langwarren, a short drive from Frankston. Elizabeth Stevens had moved to Melbourne from Tasmania only 6 months earlier. She had moved to Melbourne to study in order to join the armed forces. At approximately 7 p.m. on the evening of Friday the 11th, Stevens alighted a bus on Cranbourne Road, the closest stop to the home of her aunt and uncle with whom she'd been residing with. As she turned into Patterson Avenue, she was grabbed from behind and threatened with what looked like a gun. Stevens screamed, but her screams would not be heard by anyone due to stormy weather. Her body would be located the next day, naked from the waist up. Elizabeth Stevens had her throat cut. There were 6 deep knife wounds to her chest, 4 deep cuts running from her breast to her navel, and 4 more running at right angles, forming a criss-cross pattern on her abdomen. It's also believed her killer then stomped viciously on her face, breaking several of her facial bones. A post-mortem would reveal that she hadn't been sexually assaulted. Even law enforcement were horrified by the senseless brutality the killer had shown. Roadblocks were put in place and every resident in the area was questioned, but all to no avail. A month later, on the evening of July the 8th, 1993, 41-year-old bank clerk Rosa Toff was making her way home from work. She alighted at Seaford railway station and headed north along Railway Parade around 5:50 p.m. As she walked past Seaford North Reserve, she was attacked. Toff was dragged into the park. However, what the attacker didn't expect was that Mrs. Toff would put up a fight for her life, during which the man pulled out clumps of her hair and she bit his fingers to the bone on several occasions. She eventually fought the man off, and although dishevelled with torn stockings and trousers and no shoes, she managed to hail down a passing car. The police immediately arrived at the scene but found nothing. Having failed in his attack, the perpetrator would not be done for the night. He would immediately go searching for another victim. At around 7 p.m. that evening, 22-year-old Deborah Fream left her house to make a short trip in her car to buy some milk to prepare the evening meal. Fream left her 12-day-old son at home with her friend, as she was only likely to be a few minutes, but she would never return home to him. When she failed to return, loved ones and authorities were informed, and an immediate search took place. Her car was located by police the next day on nearby Madden Street, and forensics found traces of Fream's blood inside, alongside a new dent in the front and the driver's seat pushed back. On the afternoon of Monday, the 12th of July, a farmer found Fream's partially covered body on Taylor's Road, Carham Downs. Like Stevens, she'd been strangled, savagely slashed and her throat cut. She'd been stabbed over 20 times. Like the previous victim, she had not been sexually assaulted. At this point, investigators realised they had something bigger on their hands. The crimes were just too similar in their savagery not to be connected. The attack of Rosa Toff, which had been considered a purse snatching gone horribly wrong, was now considered to be the work of the same killer as Elizabeth Stevens and Debbie Fream. There was a madman on the loose in Frankston. Frankston became known as the place where a serial killer lurked amongst its residents, and everyone was on edge. Women stayed indoors once the sun went down, and the streets were deserted at night. Every lead, no matter how small, was followed up by investigators, and a help centre was set up to convey information and talk to residents to help prevent them from being attacked in the first place. It would all be to no avail, however, as the killer was about to strike again. On the afternoon of July the 30th, 17-year-old Natalie Russell went missing while riding her bike home from the John Paul College in Frankston. Russell took her usual shortcut home to Frankston North via a fenced walkway now called Nat's Track in her memory, which passes between two golf courses on Skye Road. 8 hours later, her body was found in the bushes beside a bike track. She had been dragged from the path through a large hole in a wire fence into adjacent scrub. She had died in a similar manner to the others, but this time the killer had left a damning piece of evidence. The attack, which was sustained and as brutal as the others, had resulted in a piece of skin, possibly from a finger, being left on the neck of the dead girl. The investigation was now in overdrive. Police had acted upon every incident as soon as it occurred and had chased every lead down, but time was now of the essence, as they simply could not allow another young girl to lose her life. No external forensic evidence was found at the Stevens scene, and no witnesses came forward. In Fream's case, again, no foreign evidence was found at the scene. In the Rosa Toff case, though, she had survived and escaped her attacker. She had provided a brief description of her attacker. She said he was approximately 180 centimetres tall, with blue eyes and a chubby face. Shockingly, though, she provided one other key detail: her attacker looked like he was just a teenager. The Russell murder would provide investigators with the breakthrough they finally needed though, a sighting of a yellow Toyota Corona on a road near the bike track at 3 p.m, the time the coroner estimated that Natalie Russell had been murdered. An observant police officer had written down its number from its registration label because the car had no plates. The details were entered into the police database, which revealed that the same car had been spotted in the vicinity where Debbie Fream's body had been found. 2 sightings of the one vehicle at 2 crime scenes was just too much of a coincidence. The car was registered to a 21-year-old named Paul Charles Denyer. Detectives visited his small unit at 186 Frankston Road, Seaford, on the afternoon of the 31st of July, a unit he shared with his girlfriend and next door to Donna Vaines's sister. While investigators checked his movements, he admitted to being in the vicinity of the Fream and Russell murders at the time. Denyer was then taken to Frankston Police Station and his videoed interview began at 9:20 p.m. Paul Charles Denyer was born in Sydney on April 14, 1972, the third of 6 children, 5 boys and a girl, to English working-class immigrants Maureen and Anthony Denyer, who came to Australia in 1965. Denyer's early years seemed to be relatively ordinary. At his first primary school, he had friends and just seemed to be a normal kid. But that changed when the family uprooted to Victoria in 1981. At his new school, he struggled to make friends and was totally unmotivated to do so. Paul also grew into a big lump of a lad, far more overweight than the other kids, and his murderous intentions started at an early age. He would on a regular basis attack his sister's bears with a pocket knife, hacking at their necks, and at just 10 years old he stabbed the family kitten and hung it from a tree in the back garden. And this destructive path would continue. Just before his 13th birthday he was charged with stealing a car. 2 months later he was in trouble again, and then at 15 Paul was charged again for forcing a boy to perform a lewd act. His adult life was no better. Paul couldn't maintain a job and didn't seem bothered about trying. He worked at a Safeway but lost his job after purposely hitting a woman and a child with a trolley. Another job at a marine workshop, again he was fired. At one point he applied to join the police force, but with his size and history that was never going to happen. By 1993 he entered into a relationship with Sharon Johnson, a girl he had met while working at Safeways. However, he was now a complete social outcast, who was only interested in murder. Denyer offered weak excuses for being at the murder scenes, saying that his car had broken down near the place where Natalie Russell was murdered, and that he was waiting to pick up his girlfriend from the train station on the other occasion. Investigators noticed numerous scratches on him, which he tried to explain away by saying all of them were caused by working on his car. Investigators weren't buying any of it, and they had one card up their sleeve. Denyer continued to deny involvement, but when they asked for a blood and hair sample to test against the samples they had taken, Denyer was stunned, questioning how long it would take for the results to come back. Then, out of the blue, he spoke up and said, "Okay, I killed all of them." Denyer told detectives that he'd been stalking women in the Frankston area for years, and that the motivation for the crimes was a desire to kill from the age of 14, and a general hatred of girls and women. In his confession, Denyer showed absolutely no remorse towards any of his victims. He demonstrated for the video camera how Elizabeth Stevens' body had begun shaking and shuddering as she went through the death rattles, before finally dying. He did this as if he was discussing what he was having for tea. He confessed to the break-in at his neighbour's apartment, and confessed had she been home she would have been another victim, as he would have killed her that night. Paul went through each murder one by one, again with no emotion. He described how in the Fream case, that while Debbie was in the milk bar, he opened the rear door of the car and let himself into the back. From there was only one outcome. All his victims were targeted randomly. Wrong place, wrong time. Denya was charged with 3 counts of murder and 1 of abduction, charges to which he later pleaded guilty and did not contest. Psychologists and experts examined Denya, noting a lack of emotion regarding the crimes, a single-minded desire to kill, and the unusual randomness by which victims were chosen, leading to a diagnosis of sadistic personality disorder, but not legal insanity. During examination, he admitted being influenced by the 1987 film The Stepfather. On the 20th of December 1993, after 4 days of hearings, he was sentenced in Melbourne Supreme Court to 3 life sentences with no parole period. On the 31st of December, Denya lodged an appeal, which was heard in July 1994, granting him a non-parole period of 30 years until 2023. In November of 2003, despite his hatred of women, Denya began identifying as a woman and renamed himself Paula. That same year, Denya began wearing women's clothing and cosmetics in prison in defiance of prison orders. Medical specialists evaluated whether Denya could receive sex reassignment surgery and rejected the idea. Prisoner support groups said that he cannot be anything but serious about his transition, given that it would entail personal risk. One victim's mother said Denya's transition made her sick, calling it a stunt. However, Denya has since reverted to identifying as Paul. In 2023, Denya became eligible and applied for release on parole, but had his application denied by the Adult Parole Board of Victoria. The parole board notified the family of the victims, including Natalie Russell's father Brian and Deborah Fream's son Jake.